Like thousands of others, you may have been glued to your television screens watching HBO's new miniseries Chernobyl, which tells the story of one of the world's worst nuclear disasters, when the Chernobyl power plant had a reactor that blew up in the USSR in 1986. The television show has the highest rating on IMDb ever and has even inspired tourists to flock to the radioactive zone in Ukraine. If you watched in the US, you may feel like the show had almost nothing to do with your real life. After all, it's about a tragedy that took place a long time ago, all the way across the world in a different political system. But could it happen here? To understand the likelihood of a meltdown in the US, Wired caught up with nuclear historian Kate Brown from MIT to talk about the risks of nuclear disaster in the US and what would happen if a Chernobyl happened here.
My name is Kate Brown, and I'm a professor of science, technology, and society at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and I study environmental history and nuclear history.
You've been to Chernobyl, you've spent a lot of time there. Did you watch the show? What did you think?
I found that visually it was quite good. I used to live in the Soviet Union during those same years, so people, dressed in that same way. Certainly the characterizations of firemen getting sick and their skin, dissolving, and those horrifying scenes in the hospital, those do come out. Those are similar pictures that they got from medical manuals. And I think the show presents kind of two so-called truths. One is that only the Soviets, it could never happen like here in the United States, only the Soviets could lie so thoroughly, be so incompetent, screw up so royally. Yet at the same time, the show shows these same Soviets heroically, altruistically sacrificing their bodies to save the world from yet greater nuclear hazard.
And so many of the people who were watching the show this past month have said, wow, I'm so glad I live in America. Could this happen in the US?
We have had accidents in the United States at nuclear power plants, and 3 Mile Island was the biggest of them. There was a plane flying over the American Southeast, and it accidentally dropped 2 nuclear missiles, poof, landed right in the ground. I mean, we've had so many things that almost went wrong, went close to being wrong. We have a real problem with radioactive waste. If it's not put in a stable place and monitored for hundreds, sometimes thousands of years, it will overheat and blow up and create a big nuclear accident or explosion. Every nuclear power plant is storing its radioactive waste right there on site in cement pools. The water acts as a moderator so that you won't have any criticality accident. But if something were to happen to these pools that are just chock full with spent fuel rods that are highly radioactive, if we've had all these, with climate change, all these extreme weather situations, if there's a tornado, a hurricane that cracks the pool, the water drains out, these spent fuel rods will start to heat up, and once they start to heat up, they'll start to perhaps go critical, and they could cause explosions that would, make Chernobyl look like a picnic. Our biggest Superfund site in the country is the Hanford Plutonium Plant site, which is the Hanford Nuclear Reservation today. There's high-level waste that's stored in bins that were built to have a shelf life of 10 years, and that was 60 years ago. And those underground storage bins are starting to crack and to leak, and they're leaking high-level radioactive waste, a Dixie cup of which would poison everybody in a large auditorium. All that is leaking towards the watershed, towards the Columbia River.
What are the state of our protections for the workers at these sites? If a disaster happens, is there a protocol that everyone knows?
I think if you were to poll people who live near nuclear reactors around the country, you would find that they probably don't have any idea what they're supposed to do. Radioactive isotopes are so dynamic and invisible and insensible, it's really hard to keep track of them and to manage them. It's really hard to keep people around any kind of nuclear site safe.
I mean, we can't have nuclear power without putting the waste somewhere. So
Right.
Is there a solution?
Despite that sort of can-do America, we can do anything kind of attitude, we have not solved this problem, even though we are the pioneers of nuclear energy and nuclear bombs. Finland is the one country in the world that's built a deep underground nuclear repository for their waste, and most people consider that a successful program so far. But mind you, they have to have this place watched and an infrastructure and energy going to it for 1,000 years. So, it's hard to imagine that kind of stability, political, economic, infrastructural stability of any society. Maybe human society doesn't have the ability to deal with the timescales that nuclear power and nuclear waste demands when we're talking about centuries and millennia. Maybe that's just beyond our human capabilities.
Thank you so much for chatting with us. This has been really enlightening and terrifying, and it was just a pleasure to talk.
Okay. Thanks for having me on your show. Take care.
You too.